A sailor who was removed from a key position on the Titanic at the very last minute may have played a catastrophic role in its sinking. As second officer on the ill-fated ship, David Blair was in charge of looking after the keys which opened a cabinet containing the crow's nest binoculars. However, Mr. Blair was replaced by a more senior sailor by the Titanic's owner, White Star Line, and accidentally forgot to hand the key over to his successor. Without it, his shipmates were unable to get to the binoculars, which helped to look out for dangers in the distance, including signs of bad weather and icebergs. Lookout Fred Fleet, who survived the disaster in which 1,522 people died, later told an inquiry that if they had binoculars they would have seen the iceberg sooner. When asked by a U.S. senator how much sooner it might have been spotted, Mr. Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." The story of Mr. Blair is being retold as bravery medals awarded to him in a separate sea disaster go on sale. Murray Shaw, 78, bought a set of 9 medals, including an OB for war service, from a dealer in 2011. They are now going up for auction at Hanson's Auctioneers in Derbyshire on Monday, with an estimate of around £18,000. Mr. Shaw told the Burton Mail David Blair was standing by for 3 months in Belfast when the Titanic was being built and was signed on for the whole of the New York voyage. He would have been responsible for all the navigation equipment but was taken off the ship in Southampton, surplus to requirements. As a former Navy man myself, I can understand why he would have been upset. Mr. Blair, from Tayside, was 37 when he sailed on the Titanic from Belfast to Southampton, and Mr. Fleet recalled his shipmate having the binoculars with him during the 2-day trip. He had been due to be the second officer for the maiden voyage to New York on April 10 but was told at the 11th hour he wasn't going. Bosses at White Star Line decided Henry Wilde, the experienced chief officer of the Titanic's sister ship the Olympic, should be transferred instead. As a result, everybody was moved down a rank, but Mr. Blair was deemed too senior to take up the position of third officer and was tasked to another ship. Although the move would prove to save Mr. Blair's life, he wrote of his disappointment in a postcard he sent to his sister-in-law. He wrote, "I'm afraid I shall have to step out to make room for Chief Officer of the Olympic. This is a magnificent ship. I feel very disappointed I am not to make her first voyage." Mr. Blair kept the key as a memento and eventually passed it on to his daughter Nancy, who gave it to the British and International Seamen's Society in the 1980s. The key and the postcard, which had an estimate of around £70,000, sold at auction in 2007. The 46,000-ton Titanic struck the iceberg in the North Atlantic at 11:45 p.m. on April 14 and sank at 2:20 am on April 15. During the official U.S. inquiry into the sinking, Lookout Fred Fleet said he had previously used binoculars, known as glasses, on the RMS Oceanic. Another transatlantic liner, Senator Smith, chair of the inquiry, asked Fleet, "Suppose you had glasses. Could you have seen this black object, the iceberg, at a greater distance?" Fleet replied, "We could have seen it a bit sooner." Asked, "How much sooner?" he said, "Well, enough to get out of the way." In Mr. Blair's defense, Mr. Aldridge added, "Blair would have been rushing about tidying up his loose ends before then. In his rush it slipped his mind to hand over the key, so the fate of the Titanic was in his hands in a roundabout way. But in terms of blame, then you have to look at the captain, E.J. Smith. The ship was going too fast in an ice field which he had warnings about." He continued, "There was a pair of binoculars on the bridge and a pair for the crow's nest because Blair had them just days before, but the failure to provide the lookouts with them could have been down to Lightoller not knowing where they were. He would have found them had he been able to open the locker, so in the end all the lookouts had were their own eyes."
Tell me where the freak's at.